Fans on Twitter are really up in arms over a Little Caesars ad of all things, and I'm just so sick of all of the CGI discourse, which is exactly what we'll be talking about in today's video. So, with the upcoming release of the Fantastic Four First Steps, we are seeing product tie-ins with all different kinds of brands like Little Caesars, Pop-Tarts, you know, the usual things you would see slapped on a product for a summer blockbuster. But some people have some very harsh criticisms of a commercial that was recently released for Little Caesars featuring the Fantastic Four. The ad itself pays homage to the first issue of the Fantastic Four, where Marvel's first family fights the Mole Man and the monster Giganto. You may remember a few months ago it was announced that an in-universe tie-in comic would be releasing in early July, and the cover for that comic also features the same battle portrayed in this advertisement, which is the Fantastic Four fighting Giganto. As I mentioned, the ad itself has been divisive among fans, with some saying this is a scene that we will be seeing in the movie, and others implying it is simply just for the commercial. Honestly, we aren't going to know until the movie releases, but a majority of the criticism has been aimed specifically at the CGI for Giganto, and I'm gonna be honest, I don't understand why. The CGI for the monster itself looks pretty solid. I think some of the background civilians running away and the billboards look slightly off, but there's a pretty good reason why that is. If this is a scene that was taken out of the movie, it was probably given to Little Caesars' marketing department before they had fully completed the CGI rendering of the scene. They most likely used a completed model of Giganto, but they probably haven't fine-tuned those smaller details. Those are some of the last things that are taken care of. So the Little Caesars advertising team has this nearly completed clip from the movie. That way they could fill out the background billboards with Little Caesars advertisements and complete the sequence with a much smaller budget compared to what Marvel is making, which is why the compositing looks so off on the Little Caesars specific actor that was put into the scene. So I do think there is enough evidence here to determine the fact that this is something we'll be seeing in the movie, but without the addition of all of the Little Caesars adverts. I'm also willing to bet that this is just a much smaller portion of a larger montage sequence that we'll see at the beginning of the movie, based on some leaks and the information we know about that tie-in comic that I mentioned earlier. As I said, the comic is written from the perspective of somebody in-universe, and the comic itself is supposed to be a dramatization of the Fantastic Four origin, something that will probably just be briefly featured in the movie. As we learned earlier, the movie is set a couple of years into the Fantastic Four's career, and the movie itself is rumored to feature the Mole Man in some capacity. Most likely, he's going to be played by Paul Walter Hauser. He's currently not attached to play any specific character in the movie, and I was holding off suggesting that he would be playing Mole Man due to the fact that the Fantastic Four's robot Herbie was uncast until a couple of weeks ago, when we found out that sound editor and voice of General Grievous, Matthew Wood, would be voicing the character. But let's look back at this advertisement, specifically the CGI for Giganto. And I'm gonna reiterate, I don't see where the criticism is. This looks one-to-one what the character looked like in the comic book, and he doesn't have those elements of over-design that a lot of people like to complain about when it comes to characters adapted to the MCU. And every time I try and look for some kind of explanation of what people think looks wrong with this, I can't find any. Everybody just says it looks rough, but like, tell me why it looks rough. What looks wrong with this? And look, I know bad CGI exists. Trust me, I just saw The Flash a couple years ago and saw how bad CGI could look. Justice League 2017, the same thing. But the CGI discourse has been so bad since 2020. And I will admit, Marvel specifically has dropped the ball when it comes to CGI for certain movies. But getting so up in arms upset over a Little Caesars ad is just way too far, especially when it doesn't look that bad. It also looks so much worse when you're watching it heavily compressed on Twitter. I'm all for being critical about movies, but make your criticism make sense. A much shorter video for today, so we're gonna wrap this up by answering a couple of your mailbag questions. If you have a question you want to be answered in a later video, leave it down in the comments below with the hashtag mailbag. Our first question comes from Culchy Films 1791. They ask, do you think think our assumption that the reason that Ironheart was delayed so long because it sucked was incorrect. This trailer makes me think that they could have just wanted it to come out after Agatha all along. Honestly, I don't think Marvel was that worried about Ironheart ever to begin with, but I do think that additional time that they had after they wrapped filming was very beneficial to the CGI used in the show. It looks much better than anything we saw in She-Hulk or Secret Invasion, which did come out around the same time that this show wrapped filming. But yeah, given the themes of the show, I do think they did want Agatha all along to come out beforehand. And we're also aware that Ironheart was one of the last shows to be produced prior to the 2023 creative overhaul, where Marvel made the conscious decision to stop making 6 or 8 episode miniseries and focus more on multi-season shows. I do think there was a bit of a misstep with not releasing this show sooner, but we're not going to know what the overall quality of this series will be until it starts releasing next week. Thank you so much for that question. Our next question comes from Guesser, who asks, do we really think Pedro Pascal, Vanessa Kirby, and Joseph Quinn are really going to be here for the long haul in a soft rebooted MCU? I feel like it's not as daunting for Ebon Moss-Backrack since it's mostly mocap and voice work. There's just this part of me that thinks it's a stretch that the other 3 will commit to a 10+ year run, and I really do think that they will stick around. I understand the concern that Pedro Pascal, who has had a very busy schedule recently, won't have the time necessary to commit to the MCU, but given the fact that he's really slowed down work on The Mandalorian, which is his other big franchise role, The Last of Us he's kind of done with at this point, and he's still able to find the time to appear in smaller projects, shows me that he does have the dedication it takes to appear in a longer running franchise like the MCU. And I think the same could be said for Vanessa Kirby. The Mission Impossible franchise is done as far as we know, and that's the only other big franchise she was really committed to aside from The Crown, and that's over as far as I know. But Joseph Quinn is a relatively younger and up-and-coming actor compared to the other 2. Currently, he's unattached to any other franchises, so I think the MCU is a good place for him to be right now to get consistent work while building out his filmography with other roles. I know he's tapped to play one of the Beatles in the Sam Mendes 4-part Beatles biopic, so I think we'll see him in other movies similar to that, just smaller dramas while he's working on the MCU. And like you said, it is a bit easier for Ebon Moss-Backrack given the fact that it is voiceover and mocap, but he does have to commit a similar amount of time and energy to the MCU. Thank you so much for that question though. We are going to wrap up this video with one final question from Roderick8167. They ask, James Gunn recently said that this version of Superman has been in the game for 3 years. So do you think Superman has met the DCU Batman and Wonder Woman yet? And also, what year do you think we will see Batman and Wonder Woman make their official DCU debuts? Fantastic question. I do think there is a possibility that Batman and Superman have interacted with one another, but I don't know if we've gotten to the point where they've actually formed any kind of team or alliance. I think currently there could be the idea that there is a general awareness of one another, and the same could go for Wonder Woman. It all depends on how James Gunn plans to adapt that character to the DCU, especially with how successful the 2017 Wonder Woman was. I think a better idea with that character would be to adapt the Earth 1 version of Wonder Woman to the DCU, where instead of interacting with Man's World during World War I or World War II if we're talking about original comic Wonder Woman, she instead leaves Themyscira during the modern day. And I have a feeling we won't be seeing Batman or Wonder Woman until at least 2028 at the earliest. Thank you so much for your questions. Again, if you want to leave your own for me to answer in a future video, drop it in the comments down below with the hashtag mailbag. But thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.